Good morning and welcome to the Ministry of Housing, a digital workshop series empowering houses of worship to understand the real estate development process. You can join us every Tuesday, and we have two more programs coming up. This partnership this program is a partnership between the San Francisco Interfaith Council and DCG Strategies. If you missed any of our programs, you're welcome to find them at youtube.com/SF Interfaith Council. Today is how to partner with a developer. And like I said, coming up, we have how to partner with a lawyer and an important piece on partnering with local government. In today's event, you're going to learn the best practices for how to work with developers and the key to selecting the right one. Ramie Dare will share case studies, personal experience, and wisdom about how to foster a great relationship with a developer to ensure a successful development phase. We are so appreciative of the San Francisco Foundation because this program is supported by a grant from them. A bit of housekeeping: this program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of the screen and send a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the host and answered time permitting. For closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. And at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council. And on behalf of the SFIC and our collaborating partner, DCG Strategies, I want to welcome you to this fourth segment in a 6-week online series entitled The Ministry of Housing. This series is made possible by a generous grant from the San Francisco Foundation. According to San Francisco Planning Department records, there are 800 properties in our city owned by religious entities, many of which are underutilized and whose faith communities are struggling financially. At a time when San Francisco is in dire need of more and affordable housing, the leadership of these entities also recognize the moral obligation to be responsible stewards of their properties in order to provide for the greater good. In response to these needs, at the height of the tech boom and soaring real estate prices, the most prominent faith leaders in San Francisco gathered and formed the Interfaith Essential Housing Task Force. Collaborating with and drawing upon the generous wisdom of DCG Strategies, this task force seeks to achieve its vision of helping its diverse constituencies transform their real estate assets so that those properties may realize their potential and help provide the sorely needed housing for San Franciscans who otherwise could not afford to live here and thus would be forced to relocate. Building upon the highly successful recent in-person workshop of the same name, this series is designed to cast a wider net in assisting and supporting congregations and religious institutions contemplating developing their properties for affordable housing. Realizing that developing property in a city like ours can be daunting and is not the primary field of expertise of congregation leaders, it is our hope that the curriculum being offered in this series will provide the unique opportunity for attendees to learn from leading industry experts, including architects, affordable housing finance specialists, developers, attorneys, and the San Francisco Planning Department. Explore public and private funding solutions to support development and learn ways to partner with real estate professionals to reach their goals. Thank you for taking time to join us in what promises to be an invaluable learning opportunity. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce friend and valued colleague, Landis Graden, founder and principal of DCG Strategies. Landis, it's great to see you, my friend.
Good morning, Michael. It's fantastic to see you.
It's Tuesday. It must be another segment.
Right. We've had a fantastic several weeks of meeting together. And again, as I say every week, I thank you for your vision. This information is critical to get to houses of worship who really need to understand how to navigate the development process so that they can accomplish their desired outcomes. And as we know, if they don't understand the process, then they can end up somewhere that they never intended to go. And I just want to thank you for putting this together and really making it accessible for folks who really just need to know the basics and fundamentals of real estate development. So with that being said, I want to recap a little bit. And what we started, week one was all about assessing, is there a there? Meaning, can the property support development physically? Does the property have the underlying zoning and general plan? And is there internal alignment? And what we felt best practice was about making sure that before you go out into the development journey, that you have some critical understandings and learnings about the feasibility of the development, that you know that what you are about to do can actually be successful. And it's important to have those initial assessments because you don't want to go down this pathway and get deep into it, spend resources only to learn that you don't have a viable project. So we start with the there. And then we pivot to bringing in an architect. So that was week two. And I encourage you to go back and read listen to prior segments because I think they're all very valuable if you haven't been with us on this journey. And it's an iterative process. So after you've established internal alignment, you have an understanding that the property can physically support development and legally support development. You want to move into an architect. And part of this journey early on is for the house of worship or the faith-based community to learn before you start down this pathway with a developer, which oftentimes could happen. And we've seen some unintended consequences when you go from concept straight to development partner. We also recommend that you bring in an owner rep. So if you think about real estate brokerage work, if you're going to sell your house or sell a building, folks will hire a developer. If you go into a legal proceeding, you're going to bring a lawyer with you. A broker. If you go into a legal proceeding, you're going to bring a lawyer with you. But if you're going into a development venture, which is super complex, very risky, oftentimes churches or houses of worship don't have representation. So we do highly recommend that you bring an owner's rep with you or a development consultant that is there to represent your best interests and help you navigate this. So after you bring the architect in, we're doing basic capacity study and just some other thoughts about what is the potential programming. Do we want to serve seniors? Do we want to serve families? Do we want to serve veterans? So you're narrowing your focus and getting into alignment and vision. So after your architect helps you understand what you're going to be able to do on the site physically, then we look at the numbers. Oftentimes, development projects are stalled from lack of funding, and it's better to know at the onset how long that process is going to take and if there is adequate capital or available capital to build your project. So that's something that we also study early before you've technically made a decision to go forward with development. And then after we understand that the project has the propensity to pencil, we're at a pivot point in the journey. And that's what today's session is. Today is about how do you partner with a developer? Unlike anyone else that you work with, whether it be your attorney, the architect, your financial consultant, the developer is actually your partner. And that becomes, I will say it's the point of no return. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that you're entering into a binding legal agreement. Basically, you're going to enter into a marriage. If you had an architect and it just didn't work out, you can just swap out your architect or your lawyer or your development consultant. It's not easy to swap out your development partner once you've signed those documents. And so today's session is all about how do you partner with the right developer. You are already armed with your financial information. You are already armed with the physical potential for your site. And you kind of have a greater understanding of what direction you want to go in. Now it's about, well, who's going to actually build this project? Who's going to help us manage this project? And who's going to take this through the finish line and then be in this relationship with us for at least 15 years if we're going to use tax credits. And so today's session is all about how do you partner with a developer. We brought in Ramie Dare from Mercy Housing, a fantastic professional with deep experience, and Mercy has a great brand. We're not personally endorsing any particular developer, but we wanted to bring in someone who can provide you with needed and valuable information that you can also ask questions. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ramie, and then we'll follow up with some questions, and Mike will bring us into a deeper Q&A.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So I have a presentation that I'm going to go through, and then I understand we can do some Q&A afterwards. So why don't we bring up the presentation and we'll walk you through. Okay. So as Landis says, my name is Ramie Dare, and I'm with Mercy Housing California, and I'm the regional director here in the Bay Area for our real estate team. And you may have heard of Mercy Housing California. We were founded by a group of Catholic women religious in the 1980s that saw a huge crisis of affordable housing and decided to found an organization to produce actual affordable housing. And we're national in scope. I work in the California group, and our mission is to create stable, vibrant, and healthy communities through development and financing and operating affordable program-enriched housing for families, seniors, and people with special needs, including those who are exiting homelessness. Next slide, please. So this is just a little snapshot of our presence in California. You can see we're pretty heavy in the Bay Area and the Sacramento region, and as well as Los Angeles. And we have 11,000 homes throughout the state that we own and operate and manage. And we have another 3,000 in the pipeline. We do partner a lot with nonprofit organizations and faith groups. And through our 40 plus years of history, we have developed over 30 affordable housing developments with churches throughout the state. Next slide. So I wanted to show you some examples of those 30 that we've completed over time. So the first example is Garden Park Apartments in the Pleasant Hill. And this, I would say, is probably one of the most involved in terms of the congregations or the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa, one of the most involved examples that you'll probably ever hear about. So there were groups that came together and really wanted to be involved in every aspect of provision of housing and services for people, particularly families who are exiting homelessness. So we partnered together, created a legal entity, and walked every step together to buy a property that was a former hotel and turn it into housing for families. And the Interfaith Council ended up being the service provider, and we ended up being the developer and the property manager. But again, they were very, very involved. I think it's one of the best examples of really coming together. On the second one, on the other end, the Archdiocese in Colma had a piece of land, and it was underutilized, and they decided that they could sell it to us. Actually, have a long-term ground lease, but sell it to us. And we built a new development that has 66 apartments for veterans, many of whom have been homeless, chronically homeless. We were able to pay a market rate price for the land through the form of a capitalized ground lease. And then the Archdiocese really did not have any other role except to provide the site to us and sell the land. The kind of maybe in between example is the last one, which is St. Andrew Senior Community. The local parish there sold the land to us, and we built 50 new apartments for seniors. And the parish was able to take the proceeds from that land sale to be able to build a new parish hall adjacent to our senior development. Next slide, please. So I thought before we talk about how to partner with a developer, I could share a little bit about what is a developer. So an affordable housing developer can be a nonprofit or a for-profit organization. And typically that organization will develop, own, and operate, meaning property manage, the affordable housing building complex, units, homes. There's all sorts of names, but so they'll usually play all those roles. And often you'll see, particularly those that are nonprofit organizations, they will coordinate resident services for the residents that live in that housing. And they will provide services on site, or they'll find another service organization to do that, and often connect the residents to services in the community as well. And there are many, many amazing nonprofit and for-profit housing developers here in the Bay Area. So we're really fortunate to be able to have a really great long history of that kind of infrastructure. And so the developer's role is to basically do soup to nuts. When my friends ask me, like, what do you do as a developer? I like to ask them to think about, like, if they had a piece of land, what would they do with it? And then my favorite, I think, answer from my friend was, I would like to build a baseball stadium. So, okay, well, for that baseball stadium, what do you have to do? So you have to think through all those things that need to happen in order for that baseball stadium to be built. So you're looking at the feasibility of it, and Landis talked about that. Looking at, like, how can I really, like, put a baseball stadium here, or housing? Looking at the community needs, like what is it that this city or neighborhood could really benefit from with a new development, and there's a lot of information about that typically in what's called a housing element, and you might learn about that later. You have to coordinate all the design by the architects and all the engineers, and getting all the permits to build what you want to build. You have to engage the community in the surrounding area and get their best advice on how to develop what you're planning, and how can they be involved in the long term too, if that's of interest. Of course, you have to put your financing together to build what you want to build, and then manage that construction. So hire that general contractor and make sure that the quality of construction is what you need, and that you're getting the product that you need in order to be able to own and operate it. And then, of course, working on getting people into that housing. So marketing that housing, and doing the mechanics of all the requirements to be able to sign leases and move them in. And then because of the funding that we use, we have a lot of regulations. And so we want to make sure that we as developer are fully cognizant of what those regulations are, and comply with those. So there's many more things and details around what the developer's job is, but that's kind of like a little bit of a summary. We also manage risks. So Landis said there are a lot of complications with real estate development, and you could probably think of a lot yourself based on your experience owning your property and trying to improve, or just your life experience. It could be environmental, financial, legal, reputational. There's boundless risks. So it's really our job as developer to kind of identify what those, and try to manage and mitigate them. We do get loans and investments to be able to finance our development. And so in exchange for those funds, we often have to provide financial guarantees to those lenders and investors. Promise to repay the loan, for example, or promise to complete the construction within the budget that we have set. So in exchange for all of the work that we do as developer, and our staffing, and for mitigating the risks, we earn a developer fee that is part of the development budget. And so that's how we kind of keep ourselves going. Next slide. Okay, so here's some, I guess, suggestions on what to think about as you work on selecting a developer partner. So one thing that would be really good for you to look at is, as you possibly look at different organizations or interview them, or talk to them, really try to see if they develop and manage the type of housing that resonates with you. You go visit them if you can, go tour their properties, or, websites are often very rich sources of information. And if you can, try to get a little bit of understanding of what is the organization's capacity and experience to work with you on the development. That may be a little harder for you to assess, but if you have someone like DCG or another kind of partner expert, they could probably help you, meet the people that are proposed to work on your development, and see if they have enough experience to be able to do what you think is needed to be done. And what could be really helpful too is if that organization has a relationship with the city or county housing agencies in your area. It's just a nice leg up because each city and county housing department kind of has their way of doing things and relationships, and it's just nice to have an organization that is very, very familiar with that. But it's not an obstacle that can be learned as well. And then, really ask yourself, are you going to feel good about being in a long-term relationship with this developer partner? Are your values aligned? Do you partner in the same way? Do you communicate in the same way? There might be some other criteria that's important to you. Next slide. So to set yourself up for success in partnering with the developer partner, once you've chosen them, and I think by the time you get to the selecting a developer partner, you've probably gotten to familiarize yourself with affordable housing in a very good way. But just, don't be shy about trying to learn, keep learning, and ask questions too. There's so much that is underneath the surface. So make sure that you ask good questions. And there's a resource here that I provide in the blue box called the Study Room, that's set up by the East Bay Housing Organizations to help provide a little bit more information about what is affordable housing and the kind of issues and policies that are behind where we are today in the crisis. So think about the role that you, when I say you, your congregation wants to play in the development and the ownership and operations of the affordable housing on your church property. Generally, the more involved that you want to be will require more of your time, your staff, or if you're a volunteer setup, more of that staff time and more responsibility and possibly financial risk. And so think about that, and I'll have a little bit more information about that. And talk it through with your developer partner, your trusted partner expert, like a DCG, or you might have folks within your staff or your volunteer group who have some experience. And this is a huge lesson learned for us in the 4+ decades that we've been doing this work. We have found that when our congregation partner has a trusted partner that has some experience in a housing development, it helps us tremendously because we're able to partner better together. So what we have seen is, maybe some members will be like architects or contractors or developers, ex-developers themselves, or they'll hire somebody to actually be that development expert for them and kind of help them understand a lot of the new vocabulary that comes up, and a lot of the risks, just everything. So that's something that I highly recommend. And as you have that developer partner or trusted partner expert, and you're working on your kind of roles and how you're going to work together with your developer partner, make sure you document that in an MOU. It's a really good, for us, it's a really good exercise to kind of make sure that everyone is on the same page. And especially if personnel change on either side, you kind of have that MOU to go back to. And of course, agree to be able to change the MOU if circumstances change. Next slide, please. So what is really helpful is for your congregation to identify the goals that you have for the development. And really the housing developer will figure out like the type of housing that is best for that site, or what the great options are, and based on the site, the size of the site, the zoning, the funding resources, because there's a whole menu of resources with different kind of criteria that are location based. And so that's really like that up to the developer partner to figure out. And so the goals for the congregation would be more like, what is it that we want to get out of this this development, this transaction, including the financial goal that you might have. So you might want to be able to get some financial resources to be able to fund something that you are working on, or a new facility, or what have you. And we have found that some of our faith partners haven't identified that yet. So think about that as you start working, or even before you start working with a developer partner, because that it can be very helpful and very pivotal to shaping the actual development physically and financially and legally. And then, of course, make sure that you have the decision-making and authority set up in a way that facilitates the development process. And of course, your developer partner can help you with that too, or DCG. But what we would find really helpful is to have a consistent team on the congregation side to be able to go to, and to know that like if there are decisions where we need to make together, or there's input that we need to seek from the congregation members, that those representatives have the authority to be able to provide that advice, or provide that input, or to make those decisions with us. So think about that structure. And I know that there's sometimes many layers within. There's your congregation, and then there's layers above that. So I know that the more serious the decision is, the higher up you have to go, particularly if it's financial and legal. And we totally understand that. But it'd be good to kind of think through that a little bit, and that'll allow us to proceed with some decent timeline on the development, if that is figured out. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, I think, one of the last slides. So if you would like to get in contact with us and learn a little bit more, here's a QR code. I think we're going to distribute this slideshow as well. So if you don't get this right now, don't worry, you'll get it in your email. But you can contact Sister Amy Bailey of Mercy Housing. She is our Vice President of Community Planning, a Sister of Mercy, and very well versed in working in partnership with congregations. And then I have one more slide before we go to Q&A. Next slide, please. So I want to call out that this election coming up in November is going to be very pivotal for affordable housing funding. So at the regional level in the Bay Area, there is a lot of talk right now of putting a housing bond of $10 to $20 billion that would fund affordable housing development and preservation in the Bay Area, and projected to create up to 80,000 new affordable homes, which is incredible. Separately, there's also talk of a state housing bond to be approved by California voters, and that be in the $10 billion range. And we need everyone to vote yes on both of these, and to not only vote, but to really mobilize and make sure that your congregation members and your friends of your congregations know how important these resources are. As you probably heard in previous sessions, we use a combination of private funds, loans from banks, for example, or equity from investors, as well as a lot of public funds to be able to build any given affordable housing development. And so these housing bonds, these public resources, are pretty much at zero right now. And so we really need to replenish those resources to be able to address the housing crisis. Thank you.
Ramie, that was fantastic. I mean, it really was. It was a lot of great information. I thought it was also very easy to follow. You made the experience of learning. I guess I'm hoping to give people confidence. So I want to ask a few technical questions first, and then Michael will um, close us home with questions, but a few. So first and foremost, I know there are different models in which Mercy or any other affordable housing developer can partner with a faith-based landowner. So I've heard situations where there's a lease, and you covered some of this in your slides, but I just want to go a layer deeper. There's a lease, there is a sale option. Do you ever also entertain co-developer where maybe the owner does a little bit of the work and they get a little bit of the developer fee? Or I know some developers do that and some don't, but I just was hoping you could just re-highlight, because that's really what the relationship is going to be based upon, is the way in which the structure of the deal, if you will, is the actual relationship. So just a few minutes on, can you just take a little bit of time and just kind of briefly elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the three examples that I showed in the slideshow, where, kind of on the like minimal activity end, I guess, the congregation said, okay, we have this site, we're just going to sell it to you, or we would like to keep ownership of the land, but we're going to, execute a 75-year lease. And that's what's called a long-term ground lease. And then we pay that lease amount like upfront. That's what capitalized ground lease is. And that's it. Like we really like don't have the capacity to really do that much more, but we want to be informed. We want to help reach out to our neighbors about the proposed development, make sure that they understand that we are completely behind this, and we see this as a huge need for the community. That's, I think, pretty common kind of role that a congregation will play, and that congregation is not interested in being in the ownership structure of the actual housing. And then kind of, I guess on the other end, we do have some examples, not that many. I think Contra Costa Interfaith Council might be the one example where they were a co-developer and co-general partner with us. And I was trying to relay like how much work that they put in. It was pretty incredible. But they hired staff, they hired an executive director, they did a tremendous amount of fundraising because they were committed to making sure that the services that those 28 families who were exiting homelessness, got were what was needed. And so they kind of organized the 18 members congregations to volunteer and to provide the supports, as well as sought foundation and public resources to be able to execute the services. And that's a pretty big role. And so we said, okay, you should be a co-developer because of that tremendous role that you're playing. And what that means is that your congregation's kind of like in the legal structure for the development. And so you are named as co-developer in all of our funding applications and all of our kind of public materials. You're getting, some of the developer fee because of the work that you're putting in. Some might want to be co-general partner, so meaning they're part of the actual ownership structure legally of the housing development. And so that's, I think, kind of an unusual. Like we don't see that much because it is pretty intense, and a lot of congregations don't have the resources capacity to play that role.
Okay, so thank you for that. And here's another area that we don't think is understood enough going into the relationship, and it's something that we advocate for, making sure that there's a strong understanding and documented for the intent, and that is the initial syndication period. And so, assuming tax credits, there's this 15-year period that you're tied to this tax credit investor. And then after that 15-year period, you in essence get the property back. And we've seen situations where congregations have lost their property because they couldn't afford to buy it back. We've seen other situations where there was a pre-negotiation that they could assume the asset, or do they continue on with the relationship? So that's one area that we always underscore. It's what happens at resyndication. If you can take a minute to explain what it means, and how could a congregation who wants to stay in the business of affordable housing forever not lose their asset, or what are the things they should at least know?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if we have a lot of examples within Mercy Housing California where the congregation has the ability to stay in as owner, or so let me just back up. So what Landis is talking about is, I was mentioning that we have an investor that we have to seek to be part of the financing. And so in exchange for that investment, which is really tax credits, the investor gets tax credits, and they're in the ownership structure for 15 years. And then after they get all the tax credits that they are promised in year 15, or excuse me, year 16, then they can actually leave the ownership entity. And so what that means is then it's just Mercy Housing in that ownership entity who owns that housing. And if the congregation is also in the legal ownership entity, it would be Mercy Housing and the congregation, for example. And we have some examples where we have a service partner, so not in a congregation model, but like a service partner that says, hey, look, like, we really want to own this housing when the tax credit investor is gone, and Mercy Housing, like, you can stay in, or like, we would actually prefer that, if you're going to leave, you don't want to own or operate this property anymore, like, we would like to get it. We nonprofit would like to get it. So we have some examples of that. And so what we do is we set up in the partnership agreement, which is kind of the document that defines the legal structure. We set up in the partnership agreement that, that nonprofit organization will have the right to own that property, at a certain price. We kind of figure that out ahead of time, and you put that in the partnership agreement document, and they'll do that in year 16 when the investor exits. They'll have that right. They can exercise that option. So what's really important, if that's important to you as a congregation, to be able to have that ability to own that housing outright. If Mercy Housing says, you know what, we're gonna leave, it's okay. We don't need to keep owning this one. That you think through, how do you build your congregation's capacity to be a housing owner? That is extremely important. Like, we have seen a lot of nonprofits that have set themselves up for that, but then over time their capacity wanes. People leave, circumstances changes, there are pressures on the congregation, all sorts of reasons. And so by the time year 16 rolls around, that nonprofit doesn't have, or that congregation doesn't have the capacity to really own and operate that housing anymore. And so it's something to think about, like, put it in your strategic planning, or, put it in your long-term plans about how to do that. And I think everyone has the best intention of, like, learning, but it's a lot to, like, set up a whole new business or a whole new infrastructure, a whole new way of doing things. So it's something to think about. And of course, Mercy Housing, or whoever your developer partner is, they could probably help you think that through, or DCG can help you think that through.
Thank you. And my last question, and then we'll hand it over to Michael. And we spend a lot of time up front talking to our clients about there's a lot of competition for the funding. And you highlighted the bonds, because you're saying, hey, they're not there. We need capital to build housing. There are more vulnerable people than housing available. And so therefore, as you're going through your development process, I'm sure, like many others, you have sites that you're evaluating in different stages. And we tell them that to be competitive, to be flexible. And so if it just a really brief, because I don't want to take up too much more of Michael's time, just really brief, if you're just talk about just what are you looking for? It's like, we want to work with this type of a partner, sites that give us this many units are going to be more competitive than other sites because they also are having to score and things like that. So just as my last question is just, you know what I'm saying? If you're weighing one side over the other, what's going to win?
Yeah. So, okay. So in short, what we're looking for, then this is just Mercy Housing. Every organization is going to have slightly different criteria, but our organization, we want to make sure that the site can accommodate the development of enough units for us. So, our minimum is 60 apartments, for example, on any given site. There are exceptions, like we're working on 40 units of farm worker housing in Half Moon Bay, for example. We have a planning commission tonight, but that's an exception. Like we really want to make sure we get to a certain scale, and because we have to deploy our staff, so there's that. We look at, so how many units can we fit, whether it be seniors or families? We, of course, we'll kind of do all this conceptual feasibility studies to look. Does that local jurisdiction have funding or is committed to affordable housing development? And some jurisdictions are not. So we tend to favor those that have a working history of really funding affordable housing development. So that Bay Area regional bond that I was telling you about, like that's going to provide a lot of local jurisdictions with actual dollars to be able to allocate to developments. We also look at sometimes operating subsidies are really important. So we want to make sure that our housing is reaching like extremely low income folks, and operating subsidies might be necessary to make sure that those folks can move into the housing. And some jurisdictions have operating subsidies, some do not. So that's sometimes a factor. And then we also look at the service partnerships, who's in the community that can provide the services that we think will be really needed for the residents who live in this community. So those are some of the things that we look at.
Michael.
Don't go anywhere, Landis, please. And I just want to say this was an outstanding presentation, and there you were modest about one thing that I just want to give a little plug for Mercy Housing, because Landis and I have been in rooms with the city planning department and congregations or religious institutions that are looking to repurpose their property for affordable housing. And there's a sigh of relief in that room when we hear the name Mercy Housing because of its reputation and its working relationship with the city. I think that you mentioned it in maybe slide 3, but that reputation is really important for expediting and moving projects along. So thank you very much for that. A lot of and Landis, you feel free to chime in on any of these responses as well. A lot of our congregations not only are underutilized, but they are also tired. The buildings are tired. And so one of the objectives in repurposing is not only to help create the affordable housing, but to create new worship space and fellowship space and the like. I keep coming back to a project you all did with St. Anthony Foundation in repurposing the dining room and creating new space there. I'm wondering if you can talk about that really unique relationship about developing a housing, but at the same time providing for both the worship and the fellowship and the administrative and sports needs of congregations. What goes into that thought process? Because I think a lot of the people that are listening now probably have that same question.
Yeah. Well, and one of the examples I showed, St. Andrew's community was included the development of a new worship space for St. Andrew's Parish next to the senior housing that we built. Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's actually kind of fun to have that kind of mix within the development. And what's challenging though about it is you think about what is it that your congregation really absolutely needs? We're going through this now with a congregation in San Francisco where, they have, I'm forgetting this, they have a control of the whole church property, and it's very underutilized. But we've had many conversations to say, what is the space that you absolutely need? Because it is so expensive to build here in the Bay Area, right? It's like $1,000 a square foot, like basically. So, and we know that congregations don't have that money just sitting there, right? And so, really like prioritizing what you want that space to be in the new development so that we can make sure that that cost to develop that space is as reasonable as possible. And also like, it fits into the site planning. So the more that space takes up, then the less housing that we can build. So that's, I think, a super important exercise and not easy to do at all. It's a lot of motion involved in that. And I think that, we can help offer some development expertise for that, but it's really best for you to hire your own development consultant to work on that with you, to have that dedicated project manager, to have that dedicated expert. Of course, we're going to work in partnership with you to collaborate, but it's better for you to have your own expert because it's also that will be quite involved.
And I think on that note, you just used the word emotional.
Yeah.
A lot of these congregations have been sitting on this land for 150 years. And this has been the cycle of life they've gone through from cradle to grave, and the blessings throughout that cycle. And so retention of that property is a very emotional thing. How that property is going to be developed is an emotional thing, and being able to sustain it for the future. Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Landis? Because I know that you. Okay. We have from Matthew Busick. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Um, are there any red flags to watch out for when selecting a developer partner, especially for faith-based institutions? What has gone wrong in the past that we should watch out for?
Can I say one thing before you take over?
Oh, I was gonna say this is a question for Landis.
Well, this is reputation. Pay attention to what they've done. It's a very, very short list, but we have a very short list of developers we will not allow our clients to talk to because they have a history of really taking advantage of the congregations who just don't really know. We've seen situations where we've seen land value that should be $10 million and they're paying $1 million because they can get away with it. We've seen them on that 15-year resyndication say, well, if you want to stay in the housing project, pay us the full land values, untold numbers. And it's the same few. I think it's just paying attention to the reputation, but Ramie, maybe you can also just elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit of like a I don't know if there's a red flag, but you want to, like I said, like you want to feel good about working with that partner for a long time. And again, it could be that, the interaction's minimal, like you're just talking, once a week or something like that. But like you said, it's a marriage. So you want to make sure that you're in sync, and communication is so important that if you don't feel like you can communicate, learn, ask, understand, talk about complex issues, deal with like the emotional part of it, then it's probably not the right partnership for you, like, so.
If I might just chime in here, when we began this work, back in 2015 and took it to the city, they were thrilled because there were no advocates for the missing middle, essential housing, okay, workforce housing, as you would say. And all of a sudden, there was this parade of developers and finance people, and we realized after a real short period of time, the only thing they all had in common was none of them had the best interest of the congregations in common. It was sort of it was a land grab at that point. And I will tell you, when we breathed our sigh of relief was when we met Landis, and here you have an owner rep who's looking out for the best interest of the congregation to help filter. And so I would just say, from our perspective on this journey, the presence of an owner rep to help vet I think is really, really important in this journey, and that's coming from a layperson in this work. It's made our ability to support congregations so much. I sleep better at night, quite honestly, and it's made it far more efficient. We have a couple of questions here too from Marta Kwan Stuthers. Let's start with this one. Do you have architects and designers on staff? If not, can you describe your relationship with an architectural firm to develop the project? Let's start there.
Mm-hmm. Most developers do not have in-house designers or engineers. So there are so many great architecture firms in the Bay Area that that we can hire that do affordable housing all the time. So we hire them. We contract with them, and a lot of them will do like early work with you, to look at your site and kind of like sketch up like, oh, you can fit, 60 apartments here. And this is generally what it will look like. It's not going to be a fancy, it's just more of kind of a fit study. And they might do some code research for you. Like, so there are definitely architecture firms that are very capable and available to help out with that.
The second question is about long-term sustainability. How do you assure you will have the funds to maintain upkeep of the project and for management of tenancy support?
It's a great question. So part of the developer's role is to do a long-term projection. It's called an operating budget or operating cash flow, to basically get exactly at that. So we'll project, okay, here's the rental revenue we're going to collect from the residents. And, we're going to have this modest rental increase each year. Here's the operating subsidies we're going to get if that's applicable. It could be in the form of a contract from the county, or it could be Section 8. It could be a bunch of things. So you do kind of your revenue projection over like a 30-year period, and then you do a projection of what it costs to operate that development. And what that means is like the staff. So it's property manager, maintenance, janitorial, security, it's all the staff that is needed to make sure that building is humming and running, collecting rents, utilities, insurance, taxes, everything you can think of that is involved in managing a property. And so we do that projection, and we make all sorts of assumptions that we're actually required, that kind of dictated to us, but some assumptions we can adjust and control. And we try to think of, the worst case scenarios to be able to say, okay, we will need to also set up a reserve, to help us deal with the fact that the roof's, going to need replacement, or, so there's a lot of mandates that come with the public funding that we use, and the investor too. So there's kind of this set of guidelines that everyone uses to do these projections. And then we also try to augment them as much as we can, to make sure that we have a long-term sustainable development, financially sustainable development.
Yeah. I want to ask this question because we have one congregation that has revisioned their property and worked with the developer. And what they've done is they've retained a condominium, which is their worship space. Can you talk to that model? Have you worked with that model before, where a portion is set aside for the landholder in the form of a condominium? And what are the pros and the cons of that?
Yeah, we're actually exploring that concept right now with a congregation. And so what that means is like, let's say it's 1,000 square feet of worship space, office, activity space for your congregation that is solely owned by that congregation. It might be physically part of the development, like let's say on the ground floor of the housing development, but it's legally and financially a separate condo that the congregation owns. And so we have to work together to on the design to make sure that it all kind of fits together, if you're on the ground floor. And also how to map it. We'll have to do a mapping process with the local jurisdiction to say, hey, there's a condo here that's owned by X congregation. There's another condo that's owned by the housing owner. So there's some things that are involved, but, which we have done before. The St. Anthony's example that you brought up was not a congregation per se, but it was St. Anthony's Foundation that said, we want, the first 2-3 stories, we're going to have our dining room, where we serve meals every day, and we're going to have our offices and our services, so they owned that condo, and then we built housing on top of that as a separate condo.
Now we have from Jake Getzo it's more of a statement than a question, but I'm wondering, I'll read it out, and maybe because it refers to a particular sector, and I'm wondering if maybe you have some insights from experience that either Mercy or DCG has worked with. And Jake says here, I'm starting a program that will involve getting homes for vets here in San Francisco Bay Area. The federal government has done away with capping the VA loans for vets. So now a vet can purchase a building with 5 or more units, live in one of the units, and rent from the other units. We'll pay for the mortgage payments of the vet, upkeep, and a small extra amount, about 5 or 10% of the price of the building, to also be included in the VA home loan. That extra money will be going to a group I will be managing. We will partner with the vets to provide services needed by this vet for keeping and maintaining the building legal for them, and keeping tenants, experts to help assisting the building inspections, health inspections, etc. We will be partnering with some organizations like Swords to Plowshares to provide these services. We have also just met with another group that provides help for those purchasing and developing multifamily dwellings. I just wanted to put that out there because, number one, it's laudable, but number two, perhaps you have, and maybe not, have dealt with situations like this where you're developing for particular sectors.
Mercy Housing, I don't think has experience, at least in California. Maybe our other colleagues in our other parts of the country might have. We tend to work at a bigger scale than that, but it sounds like a really exciting model.
Landis, anything?
We've seen it. We've helped quite a bit over the years where there's an entrepreneurial effort for something like this. That's how I see it. I see it as a very great project where somebody's taking an entrepreneurial approach and using conventional resources to make that happen. And I think that fills a much needed gap. So we have given advice over the years for folks that work on that scale, just for just rules of the road, if you will. But I think it's laudable.
Excellent. We're at the end of the hour. I mean, I could go on for. I have a whole bunch of other questions here, but out of respect for your time and our attendees, I just want to say a big thank you. This has been an outstanding program, and we're real pleased. And please give our best to Doug Shoemaker for allowing you the time to spend with us. I did want to answer one of your questions, though, because when you had that QR code, we will be sending this recording link out to our 5,600 e-subscribers, along with your slide deck, as well as any helpful links that you think would be helpful to our attendees today. And we encourage all that are on the line and attending to share this with their leadership teams as well as their networks as well, because we think it could be of great benefit. We look forward to connecting next week when we will examine the theme, how to partner with a lawyer. We encourage you to help spread the word, invite friends and colleagues to join us. This concludes today's program. Have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.